Here with a new episode of Scales and Tales, and this is Locating Locrian, and this episode is going to conclude this look at the modes from the major scale that I've put together for the Scales and Tales series. And just as a reminder, I'm going to follow this with an additional episode where we're going to talk about Ionian and some of this modal kind of scale theory, and I'm hoping that episode will really bring all this information together. So if you're kind of on the fence or this information's a little fuzzy, hopefully the next episode will really help clarify and help you understand what we're doing here with modal scales and modal tonalities and modal music too. And Locrian's basically the 7th mode from the major scale. And it's notoriously kind of misunderstood and underused, underutilized, and a lot of players and musicians, they just avoid it, you know, like the plague. They're like, no, I don't want to use Locrian. But it does appear, you know, definitely in jazz and fusion, metal, a little bit of classical. But normally when it appears, it's just a brief moment of Locrian. It's rare to actually find a Locrian song, simply because it's so edgy and dissonant and different. But here's an image, you know, with some musicians and guitarists that definitely use Locrian. Everybody from Frank Gambale to Slayer. Okay, I'm going to talk about what I played during the opening jam a little later in this episode, but we're going to go ahead and dive in and find the parent scale kind of approach for finding Locrian. And we've done this in the other episodes for the series, but now it's Locrian's turn, and this is really easy. So once again, I'm kind of using like the A string to navigate or find, you know, my parent scale. And that A string's, you know, pretty handy. Low E comes in handy too. But, you know, basically this entire episode is going to revolve around E Locrian. And to find the parent scale, just move around on the A string until you find an E. There's one right there on the 7th fret. So there's the root of E Locrian. And to find the parent scale, just move up a half step right there. Keep in mind it's the 7th mode from the major scale, so the note right after the note we need for E Locrian is the parent scale note, that F right there. So E Locrian comes directly from F major, or F Ionian. So it's really interesting that the brightest, happiest scale, or one of the brightest, happiest scales, also gives birth to one of the darkest and nastiest, you know, ugliest scales in music. You know, that's Locrian tonality. So Locrian's ugly, it's very tense, and if you're not used to that tonality right there, you know, if that's really kind of ringing, you know, a little odd in your ears, by the end of this episode, you're going to be comfortable with that off, kind of strange tonality. Definitely a big shock to your system if you're just used to major and minor chords, and then you hear something like that, and it definitely, you know, it just kind of, you know, messes your ear up. You know, definitely very dark than that major scale. Experiment here. This is really basic. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to play F Ionian up and down 3 times in a row. And then when I repeat it to start the 4th repeat, I'm going to hang on E right there, the 7th note. And this is kind of showing you like where that tension for Locrian comes from. So here's F Ionian 3 times, and then I'm going to hang on that E, which is that Locrian flavored, you know, that major 7th right there. Doing, but your ear's probably begging for that F note, right? It wants to resolve to F. The same thing right there. So just keep in mind, we're building a scale from that note where all that tension is, and that's basically Locrian. Next up are some Locrian flavored chords, and the chord we're going to target here is a minor 7 flat 5 chord, and this episode's in the key of E, so we're targeting E minor 7 flat 5 chords. And just to give you a little insight as far as why it's that chord type, you know, if we took an F major scale and harmonized it, or we built a chord, you know, off each note in the scale, and we basically targeted 7th chords, that would reveal, you know, where this minor 7 flat 5 chord comes from. So in F major, you'd have F major 7 as far as chords, you know, harmonized. G minor 7, A minor 7, B flat major 7, C 7, D minor 7, and then after that D minor 7, there's E minor 7 flat 5, and then right after that is F major 7 again, right? F major 7, you know, or F major scale produces that F major 7 chord, but it also produces, you know, that E minor 7 flat 5. So we can find that all over the place. There's a very common, you know, fingering right here. You just think of E minor 7 and then lower the 5th, which is that B. Just move that B back to B flat right there, and there's E minor 7 flat 5. For it there, we could do the exact same, you know, chord right here. You can see there we're just grabbing that E note and then barring the 3rd fret from the G to the high E to produce that same chord. I actually played one down here. There's E minor 7 flat 5 like that. It's all open strings except for that B flat. You know, the low E, D, and G are all open. But it's that same chord, that nasty, you know, minor 7 flat 5. We could do it like this. You can see we're kind of, you know, moving along the fretboard like that. There's your E and G, and then barring that 3rd fret like we had for that chord. But now we're including it, you know, in this chord. That's a cool minor 7 flat 5 voicing there. We could bring it up here and do it like this. There's a lot of tension in that voicing, but also it's not really as disturbing, it seems, for your ear. You know, kind of placing some of those notes higher, you know, in the voicing instead of lower like that. You know, kind of putting them, spreading them out a little higher. Some other voicings and shapes here. Like, think of an A minor chord, right? But move it up where you've got it on the 11th and 12th fret right there. Don't play the open A string. Play the, you know, low E and high E open, and there's E minor 7 flat 5 like that. You do another one right there. Like part of like an E flat major 7 right there, but we're doing it against E like that. So instead of this, we're doing E minor 7 flat 5. We could do it again down here. You know, we can take, you know, you could think of this as like D minor over F, or you know, an F, like an F6. Take that shape and move it up here, play it against E, and now magically you have E minor 7 flat 5. Like that. So there's a lot of different ways you can, you know, kind of approach this chord, but that's the tonality we're hitting here. Minor 7 flat 5. Now, another chord type that really brings out this Locrian flavor and tonality, or at least implies it, are flat 5 chords, and you can definitely find these in lots of metal music. You know, just think of an E power chord like that, but take that B note, lower it a half step to B flat, and there's E flat 5. Right? Immediately, it just shifts it, you know, from an innocent power chord to some kind of devil, you know, devil sound or whatever. Thing down here, like an open position, move that B to B flat, and you'll hear that crazy, you know, flat 5. Right? And for an harmonic song example here, check out First Deadly Sin from Arch Enemy from the Wages of Sin album, and you'll hear this. Actually tuned down 2 whole steps, like this. So that's tuned down 2 whole steps. Same riff, that would technically be C Locrian in that tuning. But the interesting thing, you know, definitely in metal music, it seems like Locrian just kind of appears, like the flavor appears. They're hitting a flat 5, maybe they're also hitting the flat 2 or flat 9, which appears in there. And then they'll maybe shift back into harmonic minor or, you know, Aeolian or another, you know, minor scale. So it just kind of makes brief appearances. But it's that flat 5 that kind of cues, you know, Locrian. So you might be sitting there thinking, you know, I'm never going to use this tonality or the scale, but you might. It just depends on what you're doing. You know, think of those really dark and moody songs, whether it's metal or it could be fusion or prog rock or something. But, you know, think of something like this. Song or whatever, or a ballad, you know, it's really dark and moody, but that totally would serve up, you know, a Locrian idea. Like there's E flat, or I'm sorry, E minor 7 flat 5. And we had that shape earlier with all those open strings. And I just added a G in the bass, and that changed it to a G minor chord right there. And then it flipped over like that, and that's going to function as an F sus2. Back to that G minor. So if I loop this with the MXR clone looper and just play, you know, E Locrian over the top, you can hear how it kind of works and fits. So here's that chord progression, and here's E Locrian on top. About, you know, you may be sitting there thinking, you know, I'm never going to use this mode, but you might, you know, in situations like that. It's calling for Locrian. All right, next up is a Locrian super shape, and this is going to help you kind of move around the fretboard using the scale. And it's also actually a really good workout for this fingering combination, you know, index, third, and pinky, which seems to be one of the weakest for most players out there. But the super shape's like this. One more time. And you can see we're shifting and we're doing this, you know, fingering a lot right there. So the low E open, this is all in E Locrian technically, but the low E open to F, and then you're going to shift slide to G and then pick up that A and B flat like that. So that's all on the low E. Right. Then grab the C, shift slide that to D, and then pick up E and F right there on the A string. And then grab G, A, and B flat on the D. Now do another shift slide C to D on the G string, and then pick up that E and F right there. And then G, A, and B flat on the B string right there. And then right there, shift slide C to D, and then grab E, F, E at the end. So really slow. Flow to and a cool sound, that's a great workout for, like I said, that index, third, and pinky finger combination. And we could descend using that scale idea too. I'm going to start on E way up here and then kind of, move in and out of that F note right there. And I'm going to end up all the way down with the low E open, like this. So right there I was doing, on the high E, and then come down again right there. There's a shift slide, come down right there, and this one more time right there, shift slide, and then I just like the way that that flows across the fretboard. Here's another idea too. This is kind of a shifting idea. It reminds me of like Hirajoshi, one of the Japanese scales, and we've talked about that in other episodes on the channel. But it's played over E, so it has a Locrian flavor, but like this. And right there you can see we're grabbing the low E open, and then A to B flat, and then D, E, and then also that F right there. And then there's A, B flat, and then D, E, F again. A, B flat, D, E, F again. And I like investigating, ideas and patterns and shapes like that because it's not the full scale. You're leaving some notes out, and there's some jumps, intervallically in the scale. Last but not least is what I played during the opening jam, and that was At Doom's Gate, which is from the Doom soundtrack, the Doom video game by Bobby Prince, and that was released back in 1993. Doom's arguably one of the greatest video games of all time. I mean, after Pac-Man and Mario Brothers, maybe Donkey Kong and some of those games, but Doom is amazing. It's one of my favorites for sure. And there were definitely a couple decades of my life where I played just endless hours of Doom. But I remember that, soundtrack, and when I was putting this episode together, I was like, okay, and I wrote like little post-it notes, reminders, Doom soundtrack. But At Doom's Gate definitely flirts with Locrian, and it's this. So it's hinting at Locrian big time, and we're doing... Right there we've already kind of, entered and returned from Locrian, because there was the low E, pedaling pretty much throughout, and then we're hitting, an E to a D, basically that B flat, and then, that C and then that B flat, and the B flat is the flat 5 right there. But then right after we hit the flat 5, then you hear the regular 5th, B, kind of move into that C. So it's toying with Locrian. Like that. And then to really drive that Locrian kind of flavor, home, there's, technically it's an E5, or an E flat 5, but the flat 5's in the bass. I guess you could also think of that as a B flat 5, but I'm relating that to E right there. Just like we did earlier with the, the E power chord move to an E flat 5 power chord. But it's flipped upside down like that. So you hear that, definitely a devil approved, crunch right there. And there's like this crazy little fill in there. That's what I came up with. It almost sounded like they wanted it to be tapping, so I tapped it, like that. And then you got that crazy riff. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Scales and Tales with Locating Locrian. And like I mentioned earlier, it's definitely a very misunderstood, underutilized, and kind of avoided, area in music, or tonality in music. but it shouldn't be. And I don't know where your ears are right now, but when we started this episode, it probably was a little jarring or just kind of like, what is this? But now, after you've heard about 20 minutes or so of Locrian, flat five, minor seven flat five chords and flat five chords and riffs and scales and stuff, your ear is probably accepting this tonality a little bit better than it did at the start. And that's kind of, what I've noticed with dissonance in music. I almost relate it to like spicy food. I'm not a big spicy food, fan, but I love spicy music for sure. Some people avoid, heat and spice, like hot wings and stuff like that, Indian food or whatever, really hot peppers, ghost peppers or whatever. A lot of people avoid that food. And then some people, they can't get enough of it. They just consume, it's like lava and they're just eating fire or whatever. And the same could be said with music. Some people avoid dissonance. They just want that safe, happy pop sound, no dissonance. Where other people, that's all they want is dissonance and tension and, really angry or different sounds in music. So that's definitely Locrian. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.